So today we're going to talk about deductive reasoning. So first of all, make sure that you get the notes. I have a picture of the notes posted, so make sure you get that in your notebook. But like I said, today we're going to talk about deductive reasoning. So just a reminder, inductive reasoning is reasoning based on patterns you observe. So just patterns would be inductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning, though, is reasoning based on a fact or a rule, like maybe a school rule, or like if you do something, this will happen to you. So that's deductive reasoning. So inductive reasoning may or may not happen. It's just a pattern you observe, or deductive reasoning is a fact or rule. It will happen. So you're going to have some problems where you have to decide whether it's inductive reasoning or deductive reasoning. Like, for example, this says every time Megan has worn her favorite socks to a football game, the Tigers have gotten at least one touchdown. Megan is wearing her favorite socks to a game, so she concludes that the Tigers will get at least one touchdown. Now, that's just a pattern. That's just something that may or may not happen, but she's going to wear those favorite socks. So that is inductive reasoning. Or the next one says, if Peyton is late making his car insurance payment, he will be charged a late fee of $50. So Peyton is late this month, so he concludes that he will have to pay that late fee. So that is deductive reasoning because that's a fact or a rule. That's something that will happen. So on your assignment, the first 7 problems, you're going to have to decide whether it's inductive reasoning or deductive reasoning. And you can just put an I or a D. Put the answer in a different color ink, though, because then it's easier for me to grade. So like, for example, it says, Asani noticed that every Saturday her neighbor mows his lawn. Today's Saturday, so Asani is going to assume that her neighbor's going to mow the lawn. So that would just be a pattern. That's just something that happens. What if it's raining? He may not mow his lawn. So that would be inductive reasoning. But the next one says, students at Josiah's high school must have a B average in order to participate in sports. So Josiah has a B average, so he concludes that he can participate in sports. So that's a fact or rule. That would be deductive reasoning. All right, let's move on to this right here. So make sure you have that in your notes. And I know that looks kind of confusing, so I'm going to explain that. So basically, you're going to have an if-then statement. Remember, the if part is the hypothesis, the then part's the conclusion. Then you're going to be given a detached statement. The only thing you can ever conclude is the then part, the conclusion. So this says, if a car is out of gas, then it will not start. Emma's car is out of gas. So the only thing we can conclude is it will not start. You can only conclude the then part. So like, for example, if it rains, then the ground will be watered. It's raining. What can we conclude? The ground will be watered. If an angle is acute, then its measure is less than 90. Angle A is acute, so we can conclude then its measure is less than 90. However, sometimes you're going to be wanting to conclude the if part, so just make sure you never conclude the if part. So this says, if it is snowing, then the temperature is less than or equal to 32 degrees. I have a statement that says it's 20 degrees. Well, just because it's 20 degrees does not mean it's snowing, so never conclude the if part, never. If this statement goes along with the then part, put no conclusion, no conclusion. So like on this one, if it's icy, then driving conditions are hazardous. The statement says driving conditions are hazardous. So since it goes along with the then part, you're going to say no conclusion. Just because driving conditions are hazardous does not mean it's icy. It could be raining, there could be a wreck, something else. So never conclude the if part. So you're going to have some problems like that. If a student gets an A on a final exam, then the student will pass the course. Chesney got an A on the geometry final exam, so what can you conclude? That she will pass the course. So you can only conclude the then part. Some of these are going to give a conclusion, and you're going to determine whether it's valid or invalid. If the conclusion matches the then part, it's valid. If the conclusion goes along with the if part, it's invalid. You can never conclude the if part. So this says if a number is divisible by 6, then the number is divisible by 3. 18 is divisible by 6, so I'm going to include that 18 is divisible by 3. So this goes along with the then part, so that's good. That's valid. You want the conclusion to match the then part. So like 13 says, if a pet is a rabbit, then it eats carrots. Alyssa's pet eats carrots, so I'm going to conclude it's a rabbit. Well, if the conclusion goes with the if part, it's invalid. Never conclude the if part. It could be a horse or something else. So this would be invalid. And you can just highlight or underline the answer. Okay, let's talk about the law of syllogism. So this is what you would need in your notebook. All that is you're going to take out the stuff that's repeated. So it says, if it's Saturday, then Aiden will have a baseball tournament. If Aiden has a baseball tournament, then he needs to pack his lunch. So the baseball tournament is what's repeated. You're just going to eliminate it and write the if-then statement that's left. If it's Saturday, then he needs to pack his lunch. So we take out the stuff that's repeated. So, like if an animal is a red wolf, then its scientific name is Canis rufus. If an animal is named Canis rufus, then it's dangerous. So the Canis rufus stuff is what's repeated. You're only going to write what's left. So you'll type in here, if an animal is a red wolf, then it is in danger. Now, some of them have no conclusion, though. If when you take out what's repeated, you do not have an if-then statement left over, you would say no conclusion. So let's see if we can find one. If you interview for a job, then you wear a suit. If you interview for a job, then you update your resume. So if you interview for a job is what's repeated, but I don't have an if-then statement left. I can't write, then you wear a suit, then you update your resume. It does not make sense. So that one would be no conclusion. So when you take out what's repeated, if you have an if-then statement, then it's valid and you can write it. So like this one says, if Kennedy has a grade point average of 3.5 or greater, then she will be on the honor roll. If Kennedy's on the honor roll, then she'll have her name in the school announcements. So the honor roll stuff is what's repeated. I would take it out. And I have an if-then statement left. So I would do, if Kennedy has a grade point average of 3.5 or greater, then she will have her name in the school announcements. Okay, last thing we've got to talk about is Venn diagrams. So Venn diagrams, what is overlapped, if you see the word and, you always just look where it's overlapped. If you see the word or, you add everything. So this says how many students work after school and on the weekend. So and is the overlap part. So that would be 3. How many students work after school or on the weekends? You add everything, even the 3 in the middle. The 5 plus 3 plus 17, add it all. So this one says, how many students like all 3? So that would be like novels and plays and poetry. So you've got to look and see where they all overlap, which would be 72. How many students just like to read poetry? So on that one, you'll look at all the ones in the poetry circle and add them all together. 6 plus 5 plus 72 plus 8. So and is overlap, or is everything. How many students like country music only? They don't like anything else, only country. You'll only look at that 17. How many people like all 3? So that would be rock and rap and country. So look where they all 3 overlap. How many people just like rock and rap? So look at the rock and rap where they overlap, which would be 11 plus 7. Add them together. How many people like country or rock? So you would add all the country, rock, just do not add the 24 in rap. So 11 plus 18 plus 8 plus 7 plus 1 plus 17, add it all. So I hope that helps.